I wanted to start with reference to a recent international study by Boston Consulting, who found that 25% of the workforce in large organizations now describe themselves as having a disability and/or a health condition. Now, these findings are echoed by a survey of the National Health Service's 1.5 million strong workforce, which found 4% said, yes, I have a disability, but 23% said that they were managing a long-term health condition. So remembering that the word disability still carries such stigma that, well, we tend to see you have a disability, but I have a health condition for very similar situations. So my point, as we're looking at an equitable future of work, is to say that an equitable future will be impossible so long as the unintended consequences of AI-powered HR technology on the rights and the life chances of disabled people worldwide are not addressed, and that must include those who do not self-identify. So, for example, many people with facial disfigurement prefer to describe themselves as having a facial difference. And the young man in the UK who tried recently to get a job delivering groceries for Deliveroo might be one of them. Nonetheless, his story is an AI disability discrimination story. He went to apply, was required to take 3 photos of his face to submit the application, only to find that his phone didn't recognize his face as a face. The technology refused to let him even apply, never mind ensure that he was onboarded, trained, and promoted properly and fairly, and so on. So I am focused on the impact of workplace AI on people with disabilities and on the many of us who will acquire their disabilities while in employment, remembering that 1 in 3 people aged 50 to 64 will have a disability, and 80% of disabilities are not immediately apparent. However, I wanted to remind us that systems that work for disabled people as extreme users usually work much better for everyone. And if there's anything we've learned from even just the last industrial revolution, never mind this one called the fourth, is that unless disability equality is explicitly addressed, unless people with disabilities will remain excluded, noting that that third revolution has yet to deliver even accessible websites. I stress that employers and job markets learning how to treat individuals on an equal basis, including those confronting disability-specific barriers, must be a prerequisite to inclusion and equity. But I'm worried that the language of inclusion increasingly is making it harder to persuade business, society more widely, that disability, like race and gender, should be managed in the first instance as an employment and human rights imperative. This matters. I know of no jurisdiction providing entitlement to equitable treatment. Your own EEOC is an Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, not an equity commission. Now, this is in a world where inclusion and equity is increasingly described vaguely and as a choice. The Government of Canada recently published an employment strategy that states in the very first paragraph that, quote, inclusion is a choice, which I must admit, as a Canadian, I read as, we now believe treating you properly is now optional. So we have in front of us a classic market failure. Neither the buyers nor their HR tech suppliers understand disability discrimination. Neither party seems to know how to design a recruitment process that is both barrier-free for people with similar access needs, think inaccessible gaming controls, and which is flexible for individuals. A leading HR tech developer, HireVue, not long ago argued publicly that it is the employer that will be liable should a candidate claim discrimination because HireVue data was used to justify the decision not to hire. It's not every day that a supplier sends a buyer beware alert to potential and existing customers, but how many of their customers actually heard this message? So to make this very practical, just imagine you lose your dream job because your stammer caused you to go 15 seconds over the 3 minutes permitted for the video interview, and you're gone. Your sight impairment makes eye contact tricky, but you can't find any way to request the video assessment to disregard the way your eyes move around. You've got an intellectual disability and can do the job, but that robot recruiter in Sweden cannot simplify the questions in the interview. Your ADHD means you fidget in front of your screen, and the surveillance tech assumes you aren't working or accuses you of cheating if you're a student. You usually lip read at interviews, no problem, but that Swedish robot interview doesn't have any lips. And the CV screening tool discards your application because it has never heard of Loyola, the prestigious American College for the Deaf, or more worryingly, because it has heard of it. And how will you know if your personality profile, produced by scanning everything you have ever put up online, tells the recruiter you belong to a Parkinson's disease self-help network? Is that why your application got nowhere? And if you could take someone to court, who would it be? So I know our aim today, Fred, is to open a discussion, start a conversation. So I had so many questions that I'd like some advice on, that I'd like to discuss and explore. So I've got 6 quick. 1, how would you persuade researchers investigating the impact of artificial intelligence as deployed by the American judicial system to regard as relevant the fact that at least 40% of the prison population has a disability? Or how would you persuade researchers looking at the impact of HR tech on women to actually regard as relevant the fact that 1 in 5 women have disabilities? Second, where is the research grounded in an understanding of the reality of procurement? If we're upskilling anybody out there, surely it's procurement. Where's the research that helps the chief executive and her board to mitigate, if not eliminate, the risks triggered by their use of AI HR tech? How do we link the buyers who have the power to shape this marketplace with the researchers who could help the buyers shape procurement processes which proactively mitigate those risks? My 4th question, where is the research exploring the impact where HR tech developers required to alert potential buyers to the groups potentially at risk, given that they, the developers, haven't factored them into the development of the tool or the risk assessment process, in the same way that aspirin packages have to list potential harmful side effects? And how do we explain the failure of regulators to enforce over 24 years Article 508 of your Rehab Act, which requires the American federal government to ensure access to its communications to the 1 in 4 American citizens with disabilities? And in the context of this debate, more importantly, I guess, is how do we ensure future regulators meet their own obligations to regulate, given that the most robust of technical standards regarding ethical and responsible and equitable AI will have little, if any, impact if even the regulators ignore them? And finally, I guess I'm asking everyone, why is it still so hard to get disability and the fact that disability is intrinsic to the human condition into the ethical and responsible and equitable AI debate? Thank you very much.